thank you very much for inviting me here. And actually, Edna, you have said it all. So you gave us a very good overall picture. And I will try just to add my story, which is complementing what you said, and which is also focusing on avenues, on pathways, on how we can move on, and reminding us that feminist movement is now more important than ever, because we literally live in a crazy world, and we have seen how the problems accumulate, and the answer seems to be war. So the question is, what is at the root causes of the situation we are in now? And how can we strengthen feminist contributions to get out of it? So that's basically what I'm going to talk about. And actually, I get called to now have a citation at first from a very possibly feminist ways, unusual figure, but Pope Francis, who died recently, he said in very clear words, this economy kills. And why am I drawn to cite him and not the many feminists who know it as well? It is because what we need to find again is clarity. And we feminists have a strong obligation or a strong contribution to make to tell the story and get clarity on what's happening. We live in a world of insecurity and confusion, a lot of confusion, because established places, established roles, established ways of doing are breaking away. And so the first thing we need is clarity, what's happening, and what's the biggest challenge. And the biggest challenge is, and that's my argument, our crazy economic system. And I underline crazy because it doesn't have rationale. It's making the world worse. Our neoliberal capitalist system is making the world worse, not only today, but since decades. And still, as humanity, we are not able to face it and change it quickly enough before the disasters add up even more. There are many. So, I will start with the economy, then go into just briefly militarization, which seems to be the answer. If the economic elite is in trouble, what do they do? Every time in history, again and again and again, they start the next war because they need it for capital accumulation. That's a logic we see very often. So, and the question is, war is not going, and militarization is not going to bring security, not to people. Maybe it's securing a few profits, not few, a lot of profits for arms industries and other complementary, but it's not going to support life. It's destroying life. Anyway, so I will be talking about that, talking about this cycle, and then focus on pathways. But I see I'm drawn into making a strong analytical argument, but I try to be quick on that one. So what do we see? Decades of neoliberalism are the major source of insecurity for most people. There's a small elite which is profiting, which is the West in general, even though there are a lot of differences, but the economic elites and the ultra-rich in particular. And then, of course, we have it very much linked to ethnicity. The few white men, I'm going to come to them. So, but for the majority of the population, it means increased insecurity. And Edna, you were talking about the labor market, how with this increased participation of women, we see at the same time a manufactured insecurity in the labor market. And I say it's manufactured because there is laws behind it. That's not miraculously happening in the forces of the market. It's politically decided to create precarious after precarious sectors in the labor market. We can see that even in academia. No? It used to be good jobs, and now it's very precarious jobs. Most researchers, at least in Austria, but in many places, young researchers don't know for a decade and longer whether they will get a job after the end of a research project, etc. So, but this is the top where it's relatively good. But then we have the whole precarious sectors at the bottom. We have a clear and decisive, let me see where it is, attack on the public sector. So there is a war on the public sector also since decades. It is the aim, and if we see it clearly, it's the aim to reduce and dismantle public sectors. We have seen that in different countries, and now it's coming to the core. And I mean, what we see now in the US is almost a caricature of what's happening a bit more softly, but still consequently also in our Western economies in Sweden. I mean, you have a crazy, sorry for saying that, school system now. Why? Because there's private investors, there's private profit interests. You are destroying education system just because a few men, some women of course, but a few men want to fill their pockets even more. And as I heard, some of it is even clandestine money, whitewashing money in the current financialized education system. This is crazy. This is not rational and good economic policies. And we see that in many sectors. So this attack on the public sector we see, and that's very much reducing security system, reducing public social services and transfers for many. We have heard today about refugees. I mean, it always starts with like the weakest ones, those who need most protection. That's the logic of this transformation. There it's easily accepted because we are so strong in othering and not in solidarity. And then it starts and gets to the core. And so it's crazy how much acceptance there is, apparently, and this is another crazy thing, to increase efficiency. I've heard there is an argument in Sweden that there is the cheese slicer. That's called efficiency. You slice from the public sector, you cut, and the next slice you take it off, and that's called efficiency. That's attack and destruction. So we need to be clear on what we talk about. I say that as an economist, because this efficiency argument is such a lie. There is no intention, like when it's talking about efficient public sector, there's no intention to make it working well towards objectives like good life for all or something. It's sizing it down for the benefit of those profiteers. It's not even a market sector. It's a often very monopolized financial sector, which is profiting. So, and we have all these deregulations at the core of precarity in the labor markets, by the way, privatizations, public duties shifted to the private sector, and less, even if it's still formally somewhat public agencies, less and less there is democratic influence. And it's slice by slice by slice over decades. And it's very difficult to really name it. We see it now clearly, but there are so many stories about it. Economists are great in telling stories, not scientific facts, but stories. Oh, competition is going to help us all. And I don't know, create employment if we subsidize the big business. It never happens, but nobody asks for the economic figures otherwise. We are so strong in believing these stories by economists, which even don't know nowadays the economic education is such that most economists don't know that there are different theories of looking at how the economy works. Why so? Because in the established and main universities, there has been a reductionist approach towards economics. They only learn one mainstreamed model, which apparently there's a lot of mathematics about optimization and perfect competition, etc., which is not economic reality nowadays. It's a power game because we have monopolized companies, corporates in almost every sector. Think about food. Nestle is not in a competitive market. It's a big power player. Think about seeds. Think about, of course, the whole fossil industry. So in every sector, and also, by the way, in the arms industry, it's very concentrated. And these is the sectors which have a lot of influence on politicians and have a privileged access to public policy making, above all in the European Union, which actually creates a lot of problems. And this governing through insecurity. So there is insecurity for most people and quite a secure, decent life for those who are in corporations because they have privileged access, because they get tax reductions one after the other. So, but let me say, in the words of Warren Buffett, I think most of you know him. He is saying, all right, it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we are winning. And that's, I think, I put this citation because it's very important. What type of war is the most dangerous for us right now? And that's the economic war, because that's making life harder for everybody. And that's kind of what we see now, which is pressuring. And Warren Buffett here had just put for fun his age, starting from 14 until 83. I think that's a couple of years ago. Now he's even older. And how his wealth increased. And that's not by working, because it's not possible to make that much money by working. He now has more than 150 billion euros. That's by speculation. By the way, that's one of the key insecurities in nowadays world. That's the financial sector and the financialized economy. And there is strong movements against it, but it still is existing. So that's one of the key elements where we need to work to reduce the financial sector to its function of financing the economy and not of speculation and instability to the economy and the life of people. We remember what happened after the last financial crisis, which, by the way, happened periodically. It's built in the system. That's the insecurity. And what happened? The banks, the financial sector was bailed out, of course, with billions of public money. And people, and especially women of different classes, but especially of the more needy classes and marginalized people, had to pay a very high price. That's the reality of our economic system. Insecurity built in. And just one more thing. What is very important, why I say the economic system is very increasing insecurity. What is happening now is undermining and eroding democracy. There are many ways. First of all, it's the rich, the ultra-rich, the crazy rich, who have privileged access to policymaking. And what's happening in the US is only the tip of the iceberg. There it's so evident. And Elon Musk, who can do what he wants, now basically, access to politics and not the majority of the voters, but it's hidden but very evident in all our countries. A few privileged rich with ultra access to politicians, but also to media. A lot of media who owns it. You need to see and look at that, and you're going to be surprised. Some of it, for example, in Austria, it's still the church, big Catholic Church influence, but a lot, there's a tendency of like the big media moguls or whatever they are called. These are just rich people who then influence what we get as messages, no? And the other thing why this economic system is so strong on pushing people towards the right is Because this economic insecurity is, of course, making lives of people harder and insecure. It used to be that many of us lived in societies where you knew that it would become better for the children after Second World War, etc. But now that's not for sure, or we know the contrary. So there is insecurity, and it's much easier for the right wing to give false solutions like scapegoating, what I said. It's very easy now it is refugees or anybody somewhat different, who are apparently the problem, even though it's clearly the economic system. And these figures, unfortunately, that's like psychology, these male figures, which are kind of apparently giving security, which is a false security anyway. So a very big danger and effect of our system. The right-wing movement is directly an effect of the economic system we are living in. So what's happening? Just confronting a few things. This comes from the 2024 Oxfam report. The world's 5 richest men have more than doubled their wealth in 4 years, 3 to 4 years, while 5 billion people were made poorer. That's our economic system. It's simply crazy. And what is crazy is that there's a lot of concern in societies about refugees, and we need to stop, and there's a lot of support for that, because apparently there's this story, refugees are coming, they are getting almost nothing, but that's taking our wealth. That's the stories which are manufactured, which are simply completely false, but this scapegoating works, whereas these rich people who are not only very rich, just taking the money from the workers and from public sector, getting subsidized, etc., destabilizing our democracy, etc., etc. This is not seen as where the problem lies. This is huge inequality, and we need to change and get real in terms of seeing developments as they are, if we want to change something. And I'm going to come to all these who are changing. And at the same time, the corporations and the wealthy get richer and richer, and they pay less and less taxes. They have shifted the tax system. Here I have only one graph, which is different country groups, but you see the same trend, the corporate income taxation from only a few years, 1990 to 2018. And if you continue that after the Second World War, it's even steeper. So what we see race to the bottom, less and less contribution from those who have the most and who destroy the most, actually, of our social fabric. Same thing, I could bring in wealth taxes. It's also an issue. The ultra rich are getting richer and richer, but not contributing a fair share. Lots of tax treaties, but also national tax systems, etc. And the other thing is, it seems, and we have talked a lot about it, it seems a solution, and this is also in the capitalist logic, is on militarization. Every militarization in history leads to war. We cannot close our eyes from that. So the question is that, what are we doing with it? Are we accepting? Are we preparing for war? Or are we going to work on turning the economy around from the head to the feet, namely to an economy which is benefiting the good of all people? We can do it, but it means also not believing the stories. What you see here is a steep increase in military spending, and Europe is at the forefront. And we heard, in Europe, there's apparently no money for social security. There needs to be slicing of the public sector, of the social services, etc. Because there's no money, deficits are too high, because we have to obey the rules, the fiscal rules by the European Union, which are man-made, they could be changed anyway. And at the same time, what a miracle. There is no objection to spend 800 billion on weapons. And there is no problem with the deficit. I mean, here you see what crazy stories they are telling us. Because it seems as if it was an economic necessity to slice public services. It's not. And that because we see it, we saw it in the corona epidemic, where corporations got crazy money as well. In the financial crisis, corporations, financial sectors, banks were bailed out. We see it again here. The arms industry wants a bit more money, wants more profit, so they get it. 800 billion. Nobody talks about the deficit is too high, we don't have the money. So this manufactured stories. I'm sorry for being so strong, but I just want to make the point. I hope it's clear, and it actually accelerates the rise of patriarchal backlash and totalitarian hierarchies, because we are strengthening the uniformed sectors, the military. Is that democratic? Does that have a culture of equality? The police, is that democratically organized? No, it's very hierarchical, very command-oriented, like sectors, and those are privileged nowadays. And of course, that does something with the rest of the society. So there is repercussions on that. So basically, what we are having is increasing insecurity from many levels, and that's a vicious cycle. So inequalities and increased precarity, I have said that, is a root cause of increased feelings of insecurity, social cleavages, rise of right-wing, social tensions, and of war. And economic capital interests are pushing for increased polarization and pushing for wrong answers, and actually eventually for war. By the way, nowadays, no, it's not only nowadays, it's kind of already available since quite a long time. Looking in Germany, how specific capital fractions pushed for war. So it was not Hitler, the insane person, but it was an interest of capital as well, with reduced profit making at that time, which is very interesting. We need to keep that in mind. The intertwining of capital interests, like the big capital, and push for a war as well. So I have talked a lot about the tendencies of what we see now. What I want to do now is to remind us that as feminist movements, we are really strong in imagining good futures. Here, the first one, this is a picture of a publication by the Women's League, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, a great feminist organization working since long decades. And for example, having developed also this alternative security approach, human security. It's not only WILP, it's other organizations as well, but I just want to cite one concrete one. And it is based on a feminist political economy analysis of economic structures and power relations. And thus it dismantles of what is actually underlying. So it spotlights inequality as root causes of war. And it is this focusing on security as a concept. Security we can realize if there's good life for all people. So, of course, gender justice, social, economic, cultural justice, people living free from needs, from unmet basic needs, and living free from fear of not being able to, for example, cater a good life to their children. That's what's increasing security. Yeah, so that's one thing. So pathways, I want to just quickly highlight a few pathways towards a peaceful and prosperous future for all. So one thing we need to work on, and I'm doing a bit of that, constructing the narratives of the neoliberals and focusing on feminist narratives of a good future for all. And there is a lot of work that has been done. For example, the question of caring economies. That's like economies built from what do people need? We need basic services. We need actually attention. We need caring to survive, to thrive, and building economies from these narratives, and also looking at transforming the economic paradigm in this sense of caring and looking at care for people, care for nature as a joint kind of perspective on how we need, where we need to go, moving away from, yeah, from these paradigms of competition, individualization, towards cooperation, towards caring, towards focusing on the needs of people. What is here? Yeah. And forging active links between these different aspects of climate governance, exploitation, trade rules, and economic structures that actually reproduce inequalities recently in order to work towards such narratives of a good economic system. You see here, system change, not climate change, is one of these calls, which is, I think, very strong. So I talked about like the caring economies, a green and caring economy. UN Women, Ulrika is not with us anymore. They have put together a feminist plan for like economic futures, also based on caring economy, on climate justice, etc. So there is a lot of very good work going on. Another aspect is the question of global economic rules. I talked already about financial regulation, but the trade governance is crucially important. And I just want to remind us that there's a lot of work on trade rules which build fair international exchange system, which favor smaller unities, which favor kind of exchange at a level field and not in this unequal level field. For example, the Gender and Trade Coalition, but many others also working towards it. So this is one of these building blocks. Then we have at the core, what we need is reclaiming the public budgets. There is two sides to it. The question is, what is the major priorities for public investments? So we would say investments in the good life for all. Crazily, that's not even called investments. Economists are a bit crazy. If you invest in education, if you invest in good childcare, in good care for people's health, of course, that's creating the future, creating a good future. So in the sense of the world, that's the best future investments. What do economists do because they want to create hierarchies? They call that social spending, and that's bad. Investing in education, investing in healthy people is bad. We need to cut it. But they have investments in export roads, in I don't know what, in weapons. That's investments. So that needs to be privileged. You see, that's just one side remark on economists' terminology, which makes us believe the one is bad, the other is good, which is the other way around. I have here the citation of Diane Elson, where do I have it? She is saying on another page, she is saying investing in life or investing in death. And of course, we need to make sure that there is promotion of investing in life, which means social services, which means caring for like ecological investments, fighting climate change, reducing fossil fuel. We know it all. So that's the one side. And there is actually gender budgeting, gender justice in budgeting, as I like to say it. It's also a feminist movement developed since the Beijing Platform of Action, which had the roots enshrined in the text. And on the other hand, what is very important is tax justice. I already talked about the trends in taxes. Value-added taxes are always tend to be raised, paid by mostly the poorer population. They are raised, whereas wealth taxes, corporate taxes go down. So we really need an alliance, and we have an alliance, Tax Justice for Women's Rights. They have every year, they have some days of action. Here you see progressive taxation for an inclusive and just social organization of care and other sectors. The money is here. It's a question of priorities, and it's a question of additional funds to be. So this is one of the fights, the good fights, which we need to do in the economic sphere. So, and then it's reclaiming democracy. Our democracy is undermined by the insanely rich who get the privileged access. The revolving doors, I don't know who knows this concept. It means the door is revolving. People in government positions get a post, like a high-paid post in corporate, return to the public sector. In the EU, that seems like a merry-go-round game all the time. So you have very strong corporate interests. I mean, there is tendencies of trying to fight that, but we discover that again and again. For example, in trade agreements, who has a privileged access to the commissioners? It's not the people in whose interest you would do agreements. No, it's the big corporations who get their will and get special investment treaties, etc., which actually saves profits and increases profits, but decreases the question of the quality of life and destroys a lot of markets. For example, in, I don't know, Africa, when there is rests of some animals like chicken being exported, etc. All these things are facilitated by these types of trade agreements. And so that one, I'm still with trade. See, what I wanted to say is the democracy reclaiming now, and we really need to have these spaces and build on all the work by feminists, where there is a lot of work already at the local level, like the Caring Cities initiatives, which are spreading, like, for example, in Spain, with progressive municipalities, they started caring democracy, thinking democracy from how to meet the most basic needs of men and women of all walks of life. So that's beautiful initiatives. And here, this citation: no movements, no power, feminist movement building at the heart of reclaiming democracy. So I really strongly think that we as feminists have a very, very special role, because of being women, because of being feminists, because of being interested in the well-being of all. And if there is a base which really can make big progress on change, it is feminist movements uniting in this call now and confronting the insanity that's happening. So to conclude, it is like when we talk about security, we need to, what's the way it's reclaiming security as human security, as economic, social, cultural security. And that's at the heart now. It is to think about not only, of course, there is some role for a reformed and democratized public sector, but what is equally important is community-centered security, in solidarity, in community networks, in people's networks. We create the security, and women are very strong in creating that, especially in economic hardships. We always know a way around. And this needs to be recognized and, by the way, financed as well. By the way, I forgot one point, which I think talking about reclaiming budgets. In the EU, we see a slicing down of funding for gender equality, for civil society initiatives, for social, a building of the social fabric. That happened already in the last financial frameworks. By the way, do you know in the EU, we have every 7 years, we have a democratic process about the budget. So far about democracy in the EU, that's when the multi-annual financial framework is presented. By the way, there's a new one being presented in July. What a surprise, in the middle of the summer, nobody is going to notice, which will be very strong need of a feminist struggle together to put gender equality, to put financing for social services, to put financing for equality in the labor market in it, because it won't be there. It will all be militarization, money for weapons, for digitalization, etc. So that's something concrete where maybe we can come together and really put up a big advocacy campaign for justice, for financing of the good life for all. Anyhow, I talked about community-centered security, cooperation, caring community as a basis of security and well-being for all people. And finally, Arundhati Roy. I love her. And this quote, it's been at the social forum, is just what we need to do. We need to reclaim our agency. She says, the corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling, to buy their ideas. We refuse to buy their ideas, their version of history. We refuse to buy their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. Remember this, we be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible. She is already on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing.
Yes. Questions? Yeah, I think we got the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of alternatives.
But I want to say that I totally agree, especially, this, they say they have so many things and still unfortunately we are buying this.
Yes. So nobody wants to formulate any questions?
We can maybe take a brief break. Or maybe do a murmuring, exchange among people. Just a few minutes, if we have time. Just turn to each other and discuss what you think is important right now. We give you, let's say, 5 minutes to do that. It's even more important than me answering anything, because we all give the answers. So you have now 5 minutes to turn to your neighbors and just start talking about what is on your mind, about what I said, what we heard earlier, etc.
I have the question to organize it, to get you. Can you collect all presentations and send everyone? Very, very